We're on. So, what's your full name?
Brenda Jean Bolter Morelli.
Okay. Did you have any nicknames growing up?
No, and I never had one until very much into my adult life, and I felt bad I didn't have one, so I kind of eventually became, but it's only a few people that call me BJ, Brenda Jean.
Oh, okay. That's cute.
Yeah.
When and where were you born?
Grand Forks. I was born 11/24/41 in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Yeah.
Did anybody ever tell you any like special happenings that day
No.
that you were born?
Well, actually, I think, let's see, how was this? I was, it was like about, let's see, 24, 6, 7, 8, 9, 30 days.
Okay.
6. And then what was 7 and 12, 13. It was 13 days before Pearl Harbor was bombed.
Oh, interesting.
Or, they did the, yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah. And, when I asked my mother years later, she didn't remember any significance of, tied in with me being born. She was a mother.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, so she was busy with the baby.
Oh, cool. And how were you related to Karen Marta?
I am a great granddaughter.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a favorite childhood story that sticks out in your mind you want to tell us about?
I couldn't think of anything.
Nothing?
When I was
Okay.
answering you.
Maybe it'll come to you
Yeah.
as we go through. How did your family come to live?
In Grand Forks?
Yeah.
Okay, my mom and dad were both born in the Litchfield area.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was from a German family, Bolter, and my mother, of course, was Norwegian. And as my dad always used to say, there was a line, between the Germans and the Norwegians, and you didn't cross over.
Cute.
It was, kind of, I mean, we're talking back in the, whatever,
Right.
40s, 30s, and anyway, but my mom had been married to Leo Sand, who was her, high school, not high school because she didn't go to high school, but, a family close by. She married Leo Sand.
From Litchfield?
Yeah, he was,
Okay.
from Litchfield in the Lemoore area.
Okay.
And anyway, he died at a very young age. There was they were working on the vehicle, the Model A or Model T, whatever it was at that time, can't remember. And there was a lantern that was set on while they were working, and all of a sudden there was an explosion. And anyway, he got burned the worst, and because there was about 4 or 5 men that were all working on this vehicle, and they transported him from Litchfield to Fargo, which is, can't remember how long, but anyway, he was burned badly, and he died then in the hospital, in Fargo. And my mother was widowed when she was
Right.
like 26 years old.
And how many kids did she have when she was
just
widowed?
had the one,
Okay.
John Robert.
Okay.
And that was from the Sand. And then eventually, my dad, who was a bachelor, and he was still a bachelor even by the time 33, he was 33 years old. They started seeing each other, and I guess he crossed over that line.
Okay. The line no one should cross over,
Yeah,
right?
the Germans. Anyway, and so they married, and he worked. He hauled gas for Farmers Union in that area, and then
Okay.
something opened up in Grand Forks, and they wanted him to be a manager of the oil station in Grand Forks, and so that's what took them to Grand Forks.
Oh, perfect.
And I was born there, and my 2 sisters were born there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And then that would lead to the next question. So there wasn't any other family relatives in Grand Forks when you moved there, was there?
Not on the Norwegian side.
Okay.
Yeah.
But on your dad's side, maybe?
My dad, we
Okay.
had just over in Oslo, Minnesota, which was, 25
Right.
miles away.
Yep.
Wait a minute, what am I talking about? My mother's sister Bernie was in Grand Forks.
Oh, okay.
Bernie Paulson Wangrud.
Okay.
He actually lived only like 4 blocks.
Isn't it amazing what you're...
We did several things with them.
Oh, for fun.
Yeah. Bernie Wangrud, and I mean, when I'm in Grand Forks, I go, that's where my Aunt Bernie lived.
Oh, for fun.
And we even remember the people who lived next door and the ones down across the street. Because it was only, like I'd say, I think 3 blocks. You know how sisters, they kind of congregate. So yes, we did spend time with the Wangruds.
Oh, good.
Forgot about that.
Oh, I'm glad you remembered. That's what's fun about this.
Yeah.
What's your earliest childhood memory?
You asked me this once before.
I did.
Yeah, and I just can't. The one thing I do remember about Grand Forks was when the circus came to town. You know, that was when Ringling Brothers, traveled, and they had the big tent. This back those days.
Yeah.
Even Grand Forks is kind of surprising. Grand Forks, North Dakota, to have the Ringling Brothers, and I suppose I was maybe 7 or 8 years old, and we went to the performance. And all of a sudden there was a big rainstorm, and it kind of came to an end, and everybody was running to their vehicles, and I just remember running through big puddles of water from this huge rainstorm.
Oh, kind of scary.
And I was hanging onto my mom's hand.
Yeah.
And that was probably one of my earliest memories.
Okay.
I can't go back to when people say, "Oh, I can remember when I was 4 or 5." I just don't remember that stuff, but. That I would say I was 7 or 8, something like that. Anyway, I just mostly remember the rain.
Yeah. Hoping there's no animals behind you, right?
And one of the speaking of rain, one of the things that my Norwegian mother, when we'd ride, like a lot of times when she ended her last years living in Minot, where both I live there, and so does my sister Roxanne, and who's here at the this convention. No. What is this?
Reunion.
Reunion.
That's okay.
And anyway, what was I going to say about it?
About Roxanne and your mom?
Oh, about rain. My mother. When I would give her, my husband and I would, a lot of times, anytime we were going to go, say, to Fargo or to Minneapolis, then we'd say, "Mom, do you want to go and see Bernie Gordon?" That was her cousin. And anyway, she lived in Fargo, and so she'd ride with us, and then when she'd look out, at the fields as we're driving, and she said, "Seems like I've been waiting all my life for rain."
Oh, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
That is.
Because, well, she lived in the dirty 30s.
Oh.
Yeah, and she would tell us about how they had to have, when the big dust bowl came in the whatever year that was, those couple of years, bad years, and that they put up rope between the house and the barn.
Oh, I remember that too.
And they'd have to hang on to that rope, and she said, even as a child, I remember them telling us, "Do not let go of the rope."
Right. Interesting.
And, when she'd tell us that, even she was telling us that when we were young, and kind of scary.
Yeah.
Maybe
someday it'll all make sense.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
She was always waiting for rain. I thought that was an interesting, when she was saying this when she was in her 80s,
That is interesting. Any physical characteristics that seem to run into your family?
I was thinking about that.
Were you?
Because you had your questionnaire. Yeah. And one of the things that I find every once in a while I'll catch myself, I did it even just today, when when you're deep in thought trying to remember something, and I go,
oh, your finger to your lips.
And then I think, that's exactly what my mother would do.
Oh, that's cute.
Yeah, because she'd say, "What was,"
Oh.
And my sister Sandy does it too.
That's neat.
She's out in California. But anyway, I'd say that's one of the characteristics.
Okay. Of all the things you learned from your parents, what do you feel has been the most valuable?
Mostly I remember my dad. He repeated a phrase so often, it's just like pounded into our head. Honesty is the best policy. It was just, you had to live by that motto. And the other thing was, he'd always say, better to be an hour early than a minute late. So he was very punctual. My mother, I don't know what she was fastidious as far as, the house cleaning and jobs, and she made us do all, lots and lots of things. When I think about Grand Forks, and we left there when I was like in 7th grade, we moved to California, and we had hardwood floors in our Grand Forks house, and we'd have to get under go under the beds with the dust cloth, and get dust under there. She was kind of a slave driver as far as the work ethic in the home.
Okay, great. Anything else?
I don't know if that came from her upbringing in her family.
It could have.
Yeah. There was 14 in her family. She all those siblings, and she was second to the end, and you know, they all had their jobs, and you know,
Right.
how she lived was passed on to us.
Mhm.
So,
Hmm.
yeah.
Anything else you want to add?
Hmm. This reunion has been wonderful.
Oh.
I have to say, I always, you know, when we first went, we were at the first one that they had here in Glasgow.
Okay.
And we went, of course, we wanted to make our mother happy, and so we said, sure, we'll take you to Glasgow. And we went, and we had so much fun, you know, the baseball game and all the fun. Plus, my brother he came with his whole family from down in Colorado, and so we went, and then we went to, you know, I don't know, a few more after that, because that was when they only had it every 5 years.
Okay.
Then they started having them closer together, and we, like Roxy and I in Minot, North Dakota, there was sometimes when it was a conflict with the state fair, and we had, with us being in the beer business,
Mhm.
it was, you know, we just couldn't get away at that time. It was
Right.
just imperative that we stay in Minot. So we missed several in whatever that time period was. But then lately, even after my mother died, then, you know, whatever was one of the ones that we went back to, and Roxy and I would look at each other and we say, well, yeah, you know what, we might as well go. We always like it, you know. So, yeah, and every year, I mean, not every year, but every reunion, I always either meet somebody that I just have been so taken with, getting to know somebody new, and the things that you learn. You know,
Right.
the older you get, the more you care about your
Yeah.
past. So,
Well, thanks. I'm glad you're here too, and we got this interview done.
yeah,
Good job.
right.